Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Getting back to work on the MR2 in this video. Last MR2 video, got the rear suspension sorted out. This one I'm going to start working on the front suspension. First thing I did though is, if you can probably see it hanging there, I did wire in a hookup for a smart charger into the engine bay. There's a little like joiner thing that was set up with the Paul Woods harness adapter for the 2GR swap. I was able to put a positive lead into that, so that way I can just go directly into the engine bay. Don't have anything draped over bumpers or anything like that. So got that hooked up. Now I'm going to go ahead and get to work on the front suspension. So here we are looking at the front suspension, and it is going to be similar to the rear. I'm going to have to notch that bracket there for the brake hose to get that out. So I'll use a Dremel to do that. And then it's basically just going to be your 2 bolts there and the 4 bolts up top here. You do want to make sure that you have the location of this upper mount. Remember how it goes in when you pull everything out. So as you take the strut housing out, don't twist it around, and just either mark it or just take a picture so you remember that you have everything pointed in the right direction when it comes out. As you can see, my bellows, or whatever you want to call them, are pretty much disintegrated and they're just laying there. There's no sign of leaking in the fronts, but I figure if the backs had leaked and are shot, fronts probably aren't that far behind. So KYB GR2 inserts for these as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting to work on getting everything removed up here. Strut cartridge is out. Pretty similar, like you said, to the rear. I had a notch, cut a little groove in there so I could get the brake hose out. Definitely have to take the caliper off to do this one. For this caliper, it's two 14mm bolts. You can see them there, but on the bracket itself, you need like a very thin 18mm to hold that, to keep the pivot from spinning. I ended up just using these thin vice grips just to hold it. And then I was able to crack loose both the bolts, get the caliper off. As far as the lower, same with the rear, it's 19 on each side, 19 bolt, 19 nut. And then the sway bar link, it's kind of a pain on this because it comes from the back. It actually comes up in here and then points towards the back. So you have to get a Allen key, which I believe is a 5mm. Let me confirm. It is, yes, a 5mm, and then it's a 14mm nut on that as well, which that's sitting right there. Definitely a pain to get to. And then up top, it's the 4 14mm nuts as well. So minimal tools needed. It's just some of the stuff is a little bit more difficult to access than you would hope. And then as far as when everything comes out, you can see I marked, there's a line there and a line there. This is the outward direction of the top. It actually does say out on the metal portion, and it has an arrow pointing outwards, but there's nothing on the inner, so that's why I wanted to mark it so I can line everything up correctly when I put it back in the car. So that's now all apart. It's going to be time to disassemble the strut assembly. As you can see, everything is apart. Couple things. One, I forgot to mention in the previous clip, the nut in the center here, best to try and loosen it while everything is still in the car. Make sure life a lot easier. I was able to do it with it removed just because I forgot, but yeah, definitely try and do that before taking everything out. These springs, being that they were the 93 plus springs, I was able to get everything apart without using a spring compressor again. As you can see on the strut shaft, it was seized together. Like, I loosened the nut up and nothing moved at all. I had to use a 10-pound sledge to hammer off the this setup right here. So it was pretty much frozen to the strut. So something to keep in mind when you're doing this. But yeah, just be careful, take your time. I got to the point, I felt like I had enough where I didn't need a compressor. Took it outside, took the nut off completely, just held the strut in one hand and kind of hit it with the sledgehammer for a while with the other. And this is after beating on it for a while with these nuts still in place, just trying to loosen things up. So it was definitely pretty seized. You can see the corrosion there, and obviously you can see it on the strut shaft itself. So got everything apart, so now it's gonna be time to start cleaning things up and start disassembling the front strut. Just finished going through and cleaning everything up. You can see, I got most of the grime off of this, and this one does have a 92 date on it somewhere. I saw it earlier. Oh, it's right there. So this is definitely the original strut to the 93 car. As you can see, it's blown. I pushed it down, barely any resistance, and did not push back. So right front strut definitely shot. Spring cleaned up pretty good. That's the new KYB bump stop and boot. Those bump stops are longer than factory, probably by about a 1/4 inch. I'm going to leave it as is. I'm not going to bother cutting it down or anything. And then, the two top hat pieces, clean those up. One note, this piece, it does have bearing in it. There is old grease in it. It does still spin. So I will go ahead and try and get some fresh grease in there before I do install it. So something to keep in mind. If yours is seized, you will have to replace it. I don't know if they're available or not, but something to think about. So being that I can, spin it by hand, I'm pretty happy about that. I'll just try and loosen up with some fresh grease. So yeah, next on the list is going to be same that I did with the rear. Go ahead, I'm going to clamp the gland nut in the vise and then just use a large piece of rebar through the strut mount holes, break that loose, then I can use a pipe wrench to take it out the rest of the way. Update time, went through, wiped down everything with some mechanics wipes, just trying to get all of the old white dust out from the wheel well that was in there from when this thing sat in the body shop for 1.5 years. So plenty of filthy mechanics wipes in there, as you can see. Also got the strut apart. Same thing I did on the rears. I went ahead and clamped the gland nut in the vise, used a large piece of rebar in the 2 bottom holes reaching through, got it to break loose a little bit, and then put it upright and undid the gland nut all the way with a plumber's pipe wrench. As far as getting the assembly or the internal mechanism out, it did not want to come out. That seal that's on there was stuck in the tube pretty good. So as you can see, I put the original nut back on the top and then just, held it upside down and tapped on it with a hammer, kind of working around in a circle motion, and it eventually freed itself. So old assembly is out. I'm going to go ahead, get the new strut installed in the tube, and then I can go ahead and put a little spray paint on the brake clip where I cut it previously, let it dry, and then I can go ahead and get it in the car. And here we are. The insert is installed, gland nut tightened down as far as I can get it. You can see it's not seated all the way in there, but that is as compressed as it's going to get. I was wrenching on it pretty hard with a pipe wrench, couldn't get any tighter. I mean, there's a good amount of thread on that nut, so should be good to go there. And then I also just sprayed a little black spray paint on the bracket where it was cut. So I'm going to let this one dry. Now I'm going to head over to the driver's side, start removing everything over there. One other thing to note before I head over to the passenger side, I went ahead and grabbed some brake cleaner and small screwdriver and kind of cleaned out as much of the old grease as I could that was kind of pretty much crudted and turned into a solid. Got that cleaned out and then also worked in some new grease, and then using a drill with just a fine sanding bit on the end that would fit into the bushing, I went ahead and spun it back and forth at high speed just to free things up and work the new grease in, packed in a little more, did the same thing. Did that a couple of times. Now it spins much freer, not as gritty or anything like that. So should be good to go as far as reusing the bearing in the strut mount on the passenger side. So now I'm gonna go ahead, get over and start taking apart the driver's side. Next day, I did go ahead and get the driver's side strut assembly out, and like I did with the passenger side, make sure you mark which way the upper plate is facing out. So you got the arrow here on the lower portion, but make sure your camber and caster are right. You want to make sure that you have the matching direction for that. So that's out. The one on the passenger side should be dry now after sitting overnight, so I can go ahead and get that one assembled, get that installed in the car, and then I can start disassembling this one, get it all cleaned up, and then get this prepped to put in the car. So I am going to get to work on getting some stuff done. As you can see, the assembly is back together. Spring is on, the bump stop and boot are in place, but I haven't pulled away, so I can make sure everything's lined up there. As far as getting it all together, I was able to just push down with one hand enough, and then just put the nut inside a socket and just spin it on. Everything went on fine, and then I do have it lined up where the strut bolts in there, the spindle bolts in there, and I do have the 2 lines that I previously marked facing out where they should be. So yeah, it's now just going to be a matter of getting this installed, the 4 bolts loosely installed in the top, getting the spindle put into those 2 holes, bolts all through, and then put a jack under it to put pressure on the assembly, and then I can tighten down the top nut. One thing I will say is when installing it, you do have to make sure you feed the sway bar end link up into the brackets as you're putting the strut in place, because if it's still attached to the sway bar, you won't be able to get it in there once the strut's installed. So just one of those little things you need to think about when installing. As I said, I've got the link kind of fed up in there so it's in place roughly, so I don't have to fight with it. And then I have it hanging by one nut right there, and then you can just make sure by looking down in here that your line is marked up. Can't see here because of the shadow, but I did look with the light, and my line is right there where it's supposed to be, facing out. So I can go ahead and get the other four hand tightened and then start working on getting the through bolts through the spindle. And here we are. Everything is hand tight and in place. Through bolts are in. I've got the nut started on the back of the sway bar link back there. And I've got these four all hand tight as well as that one. So next steps, go grab the book to get all my torque specs, put a jack under this thing, and start tightening everything up. Okay, went through the book and went ahead and got everything torqued. As you can see, I do have a jack underneath the control arm, lifting or putting a lot of pressure on everything. It actually has the body lifted off of the jack stand. That is so I was able to tighten the upper nut for the upper mount. So as far as torques go, these four are all 29 foot-pounds, and I did get them lined up with their old marks on the body from where they were previously mounted. The upper nut for the strut mount is 36 foot-pounds, and then coming down to these four, these are 100, or these two, these are 127 foot-pounds. That's the two that hold the spindle to the strut assembly. And then the last one is the sway bar link. That is back to 29 foot-pounds. For the sway bar link, I used the 5mm Allen, and then I was able to use a 14mm crow's foot. I went back on the rears and did that as well. Those were 36 foot-pounds for the sway bar on the rear. Fronts are 29, but yeah, if you use a 5mm Allen key and then a 14mm crow's foot, you are able to get everything tight. And then as you can see, the brake line is back in place. I was able to slide it back in where I notched it, and the clip is holding it back where it is supposed to be. So all set there, passenger side, front suspension, put together, cleaned up, and everything is put back where it's supposed to be. Before I end this, I am gonna visit the driver's side, because of course the one I wasn't gonna show was the worst of this entire process. You can see the gland nut, how mangled it is. It was already a little bit bent up, and I used the same method, or I was going to use the same method as I had with all the others. Clamped the gland nut in the vise and went to use the piece of rebar to spin the actual strut body. It just kept bending and popping out of the vise. This gland nut, I don't know if somebody previously tried to remove it, but it was in rough shape and it did not want to come loose. So I just ended up having to put the body in the vise, clamping down on where the spindle mounts, and having it upright, and then just getting a pipe wrench on it and just pull and pull and pull, and it eventually broke loose. But this one did not want to come apart. So just a little heads up on that. That way will work as well. Just takes a little more muscling, and you kind of have to, it wants to spin out of the vise a little bit, so you just kind of have to use one arm pushing against the strut body to try and keep it in place, and the other arm yanking on that pipe wrench for your life, but it will come loose. So yeah, I'm gonna get back to getting this thing all assembled, put back together, and call it a day. So I think that's where I'm gonna end this one. Still have to do the driver's side, get that finished, but that's gonna be the same as the passenger side, so really don't need to walk through the exact same steps again. Y'all don't need to see that. So basically, I pretty much covered everything in there. It's pretty straightforward. With the strut tops, just make sure again that the flat slots are aligned with the strut shaft when you're tightening everything up so it doesn't spin. It should go in there, and then it should seat, and everything should be fine, so you can tighten it once you have load on the lower control arm. As far as the suspension goes, I will still do an alignment, even though I did try and put everything back to exactly where it was. I intentionally didn't clean the upper mount location just so I could see where the old nuts were, and same with the strut body where the two through bolts went through to hold the spindle to the strut lower, left those dirty, so I was able to put everything back exactly where it was. But yeah, I do have some alignment plates. I'll go ahead and put this thing up on those and double check toe and everything. that may be in a upcoming video. So that being said, if you like what you're seeing, you want to follow along, you want to see more on the MR2, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. Also going to be more videos coming out on the Cobra and Jeep. I am definitely bouncing between all the vehicles at the moment, just trying to get a bunch of work done. So that being said, I do appreciate your time. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.